This episode of Let's Talk Mate is brought to you by Novatech. Thank you to Novatech for sponsoring the show and helping to support men's mental health.
Hello and welcome to this very special Christmas episode of Let's Talk Mate, the Solent Mind men's mental health podcast. My name is Locklear and I'll be your host today. If this is your first time listening, we are all about getting men talking about mental health. Each month, we bring men together for a chat about a different topic relating to men's mental health. And this month, we're going to be talking about loneliness. Thanks, as always, to our lovely sponsors, Novatech, the suppliers for all your computer and information technology needs. And before I introduce our guests, we'd like to let you know about some great resources and support that are out there for anyone who may be struggling with their mental health this Christmas, regardless of your gender. Firstly, Solent Mind have a support line that can be reached on 02380 179 049. That's 02380 179 049. Standard opening times are 9 till 7 on weekdays and 10 till 2 on weekends. Our wellbeing experts can offer bite-sized support and information and help you find the right service for any issue that might be affecting your mental well-being. Secondly, the Samaritans can be reached on 116 123. They're not just a crisis helpline, they're a listening service that can help you talk through anything at all, and calls to this number will not appear on your phone bill. Finally, your local GP is also an excellent starting point for information and referrals to a variety of services and for advice about medication. We'd also like to add a brief content warning, as some of the discussion today may touch on themes of suicide or eating disorders. So if you think that you might be negatively affected by listening at this moment, please prioritize your own well-being and stop listening now. With all of that said, I'd now like to introduce our guests. From the Solent Mind Community Peer Recovery Team, I'm delighted to be joined today by Rob Emy. How are you today, Rob?
Hi, I'm good, thank you.
We've also got Dan Warren Holland in the room, so to speak. How are you, Dan?
Hello, Locklear. That was a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much, mate. I'm not gonna pull any punches. I've had a real tough few weeks. I've been struggling a lot with my own kind of mental health and anxiety recently. I think it's the time of year. I often do go a bit down, a bit anxious, and get a bit depressed. Like come the winter, I invested in a sad lamp. Well, my wife invested in a sad lamp. I'm not sure I'm pointing behind because if you're listening to this, you can't see me. But so I'm trying that out at the moment. I'm trying to help with that. I'm not doing bad at the moment. I was just about holding on to things, to be honest. I was just about holding on to like my own well-being, and then my cat got unwell, and that just threw me right off a cliff of my anxiety. But the cat's getting better. She's on lots of tablets and antibiotics and all sorts, so she's improving now.
Good.
So yeah, it's just been a tough month, to be honest. I think it's the change of seasons. It never does me any good at all. But yeah, I'm not getting there from talking to people about it. That's what we've got to do. You've got to be open and talk. It makes things so much lighter when it's out your own head and out in the ether and the atmosphere somewhere. Best
Definitely. I really empathise with that. I always struggle with the season. It's the lower light levels.
Absolutely.
I find that it's much harder to get outside, struggling to motivate myself to exercise and do all the things that I know I should be doing for my own mental well-being. And then you also kind of beat yourself up a bit because you know you should be doing it, and you're like,
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, there's always things that we know we can do. I was lying in bed last night, not feeling particularly great. So I put a mindfulness video on YouTube for 10 minutes, and I felt so much better after that. All that tension and all that stress just seemed to melt away a little bit. So that really helped me. But how are you doing, mate? You've asked us. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Well, like I say, it's always a bit of a struggle this time of year, but yeah, in general, kind of ticking along okay. First time hosting a podcast, so this is a brand new, exciting experience. A little bit nerve-wracking,
so good, mate.
Yeah, so far so good. Hopefully,
it was very
Rob,
weird to get back on the screen.
Yeah,
we're doing this in person.
Yeah, after the live stream, which we did in person. Yeah, absolutely. Strange to be back on a Zoom call. And Rob, how have you been keeping recently?
I've been doing okay. It's a bit weird. Usually, it's around about this time of year that my mental health does take a dip. I think there's been a change in my personal circumstances, which has meant I've got more support, and I am generally kind of feeling, a lot better. It's a weird one. So I'm feeling okay at the moment, but I'm aware that I might still have a bit of a dip, especially at the moment. Work is quite full on. It's an interesting time of year where I'm just trying to get everything sorted before I go on leave, especially because I'm going to be potentially on holiday. Well, we'll wait and see about kind of if I'm allowed out of the country, but potentially on holiday for the first week of January. So a lot of balls in the air at the moment, just trying to get everything sorted in place there. But it's an odd one. I'm feeling quite thankful actually, because I know usually it will get to like beginning of December, especially the 6th, which in previous years has been a particularly kind of bit of a trigger for me that particular day, and so I'm thankful. I'm feeling in a good place, but I'm just keeping an eye on things. I think it's just, I guess as well, it's just not taking it for granted when I am feeling in a good place. But I'm sure the seasonal stress will start to kick in soon as well.
I find January can be a tough time at work. So it's almost sometimes that anticipation of things that can also start to bear down around Christmas, I find.
I can't stand January. I always think, every year I think to myself, once you get through Christmas, that's the coldest months. It's not. January's the coldest month of the year. We've got nothing yet. Wait, this time in the month will be even colder. I'll see you back in a little beanie hat, Lachlan, trying to keep warm.
Well, it's gone now to get my headphones on, but
there's always this time of year tricks me a bit, because I think, right, I'll get through Christmas and then it'll start to get lighter out, but of course it doesn't until March. So, it's good to see you guys there.
Yeah, it's so good to have you both on the call. So before we launch into our chat about loneliness in earnest, I think it might be helpful to start by pinning down what we mean by loneliness. So with that in mind, we tend to see loneliness defined as a feeling that affects us when we find that the quality of our relationships is less than we would want. Does that ring true for you, Rob?
I think so. It can be easy to have that misconception that, someone can say, oh, how can someone be lonely? They've got all these people around them. And I think it does ring true for me, especially, again, just kind of Christmas historically for the past kind of 10 years or so has been a time of year that I've really struggled with. Yeah. And that's even when, obviously last Christmas was a bit different. I was only spent it with a friend, my sort of sport bubble friend. It was just the two of us, but obviously that was a bit of a different one because of COVID. But in previous years, I'd at the very least I'd be spending it with family, with parents, siblings, sometimes my nephews. I'd see my friends, in the run up to it. And those are all very positive relationships, but I still felt incredibly, lonely at points. And I don't think it's even a knock on the quality of your relationships necessarily. I've very positive relationships with my family and friends, but if there's just something lacking, and I think Christmas as well is it really heightens those feelings, because everything's about family and coming together, and
I find that Christmas massively escalates all of that. There's so much expectation and social pressure around Christmas, I think, maybe to play out this image of the ideal happy family, where everything's going great. And there's so many things around Christmas that can put pressure on relationships without that anyway. We know that a lot of people come under financial pressure. There's a lot of pressure to spend money on, big lavish meals and presents and decorating, going out for kind of work events and social events. All this kind of stuff can really play in. But I think you've really touched on an important point there as well, which is loneliness is different from isolation. So it's this thing that you can be surrounded by people but still really feel intensely lonely.
Definitely. I think if there's something you feel that you know, if you kind of feel maybe that, you know, you've got all these people around you, but maybe they don't quite understand what's going on for you, or you may struggle to talk to certain people about, you know, what's going on for you. And, you know, especially with, you know, mental health in terms of, you know, mental well-being, it's definitely, and I think that's what a lot of people don't realize is like, you can have so many people around you physically in your phone book, you know, or people you talk to online, but you can still be incredibly lonely.
Definitely. Dan, anything to add? I'll bring you into the conversation there.
Thank you. Yeah, I kind of think that you've touched on some really good points. You know, like being lonely isn't physically always being around people. It doesn't make you doesn't mean that you don't feel lonely. I think you can feel alone in this world. You can feel very alone and be surrounded by people all the time. Mm-hmm. You don't feel people understand you, or feel like you don't fit in. You're a bit of an outcast. You're not. I mean, especially this time of year, there's plenty of people on their own that don't even celebrate Christmas, and you know, imagine it's a really, really tough time. And I think like you're saying about just the social pressures, the financial pressures. Every Christmas film you watch is, like you say, about family, about coming together, about these big extravagant presents. I mean, I watched Home Alone the other day. The size of that kid's house, for a start, you know, you kind of think that, not that puts pressure on me to buy a big house, but that's the expectation of Christmas, is this perfectly decorated mansion of Christmas joy you're meant to live in, with the perfect Christmas tree, with like lights outside. There's so much pressure to be able to put on this show at this time of year, which is really difficult. It's really challenging, especially if you don't feel up to it, or if you don't want to, or don't want to take part in it. I mean, even look at Christmas adverts now. Like one of the supermarkets has got a family full of carrots on an advert. I mean, I don't know, carrots could have families, but if you're feeling alone at that point, I can't imagine it's going to make you feel even more left out if it looks like the vegetables that are about to be roasted are having a better Christmas than you are. It's not going to sit well on you, is it? You know, I think it's such a difficult time of year for people, and especially for men. A lot of stuff in male, or especially lad culture, is not, you know, even with some of my closest friends, I don't talk to them about how I feel. We just banter and poke fun at each other for a few hours on WhatsApp, and that's it. It's not real connection. It's very surface level.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but prior to this chat, I was looking through some of the statistics from a recent survey done by the government, called the Community Life Survey. You can find it online quite easily. And some really interesting stats there. I was just going to ask you if anything stands out for you. So firstly, it looks like loneliness is really, really prevalent. I think maybe we don't expect it to be this widespread, but only 20% of people in England said that they never feel lonely, with 6% saying that they always or often feel lonely. And we know that different parts of the community, different groups within society are affected more and less by loneliness. So the survey suggested that loneliness is most prevalent among people at age 16 to 24, and also more prevalent among women than men. Although there were some quite interesting additional findings, both younger people and women were more likely to agree that they have support networks and regular contact with family and friends. So does anything there stand out for you? Maybe let's go to Rob first.
So my internet lagged a bit there, so
okay.
I kind of missed a few of the bits, so I'll do my best I can. In terms of, I think, you know, I think that does kind of, you know, that first stat you go, it puts out there, you know, we don't talk, you know, the majority of people obviously asked, we do all feel lonely at some point. It's not kind of spoken about as much. I think in terms of, so this is where my connection crapped out a bit. Apologies. But did you mention something in regards about the age differentials? And yeah, I think there's maybe people. I'm a bit, I'm in my late 30s. I had this piece of conception in my head that maybe it's the older generations that struggle a bit, with loneliness. So I think, but then so maybe that kind of stood out to me. I don't know why. Maybe I just had that preconception in my head that maybe kind of as you go up the age range, people would struggle with that more. I think maybe I assume that's because modern world, everyone's in their 20s or whatever is connected and on multiple social media things. But I guess then as well, that's it speaks to the fact that you can have all these connections. You could probably have about 4 or 5 social media accounts, a million, 100 followers on your Instagram account or whatever, but you can still feel that, that sense of loneliness, and it might not necessarily, feel very real. So, but absolutely. I think definitely the age differential there kind of stood out to me.
Yeah. I mean, I think we know that isolation is a real issue for older people and older men, particularly. But I think you're onto something there. That this idea that maybe, although younger people are less isolated, they have these connections, but they're not that meaningful. They're not getting as much support and kind of fulfillment from those relationships as maybe they could be.
Exactly. It makes you wonder if maybe and again I'm going to sound really old and grumpy here, but in the modern world, have those kind of maybe have people been substituting those genuine connections for very more kind of tenuous kind of ones. I know that probably does make me sound a bit like an old man, but
I think it's plausible though. I think you're onto something. Dan, did anything stand out there for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Just thinking about some of the stats you've just kind of gone through with us, I think, and I'm going to sound like an old man now, Rob. I'm so much older than you. I think especially at ages 16 to 24, especially in young men, I don't think you know who you are at that point. I think it's difficult because like you're saying, it's not about isolation, it's not about the amount of people around you, it's about how you feel in yourself, loneliness. And I think that age of 16 to 24, you're already becoming an adult. You're already coming to that time where you're trying to work out what you're going to do with your life. You're going to settle down and find a partner, have children. I think around that time, you're already discovering who you are. So I can only imagine, thinking back to my much younger days or then years ago, that it must feel that must feel quite lonely to not feel that you know where your place in the world is. And I think that because I'm at that age now where I don't really feel lonely, but I'm quite happy to spend time in my own company at the same time. But I don't feel lonely by doing that. But I think I know myself pretty well. I think once you know yourself, once you understand who you are as a person, that can help with loneliness because you always got yourself to keep yourself company. That makes it sound like I've got no friends at all, doesn't it? I do have friends, but I can't think that's the thing. That age group doesn't surprise me at all that they feel lonely, because I think you're still working out who you are, and until you work out like who you are, I think it's difficult to make real strong connections with people, because when you're a teenager, you try on different hats and stuff like that. I mean, when I was 16 to 19, I was a goth. Do you know what I mean? I'm not that anymore. Like eyeliner, black nail varnish, the locks. That's who I thought who I was. But that was just me trying on different hats, as you will. I was trying to figure out who I was at the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's something which that's what I've thought about. Kind of when you went through them stats, that's the first thing that kind of crossed my mind at that age.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think when I was looking through the stats about the difference between women and men, that was a really interesting point for me that stood out. It made me think a little bit about the high rate of male suicide. And we know from research that feeling very alone or alienated from people around you can be one factor that can increase the likelihood that you might take your own life. So I wonder if where men experience loneliness, a lack of social connections can mean that there's little to stop this from escalating.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just one thing that stood out for me anyway.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If you look at the Thomas Joyner model of kind of suicidality, then that's a big part of it, is that feeling like you don't belong is a massive, massive red light and a big warning sign, isn't it? So yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's move on from the stats now. So thinking a little bit more generally, do we think men maybe feel pressured not to show vulnerability or talk about difficult emotions, and can this increase feeling lonely? What do we think about that one? Should we go to Rob?
Yeah, definitely. I think, and well, again, the name of this podcast is "Let's Talk, Mate." This is, it goes back to that, it goes back to that kind of age-old problem, that you have that, I think men are, I don't know if it's still a case that men are actually encouraged to do it so much in today's society, but that kind of historical kind of pressure maybe that we feel to be the strong silent type, to carry on, to hold it all in, I think that is still a problem, in our society. I think a lot of men do still struggle just to kind of, to speak openly about things. And if you're with a bunch of your mates in the pub and you're having it, you're a couple of drinks in, and that might be the first time you've got together with them in a while. How difficult must it be just to kind of bring it up, say, by the way, mate, I'm feeling really lonely, I'm feeling really low, I feel like I don't belong, I don't understand. It's not an easy conversation to have. And we spoke about kind of that relationship we would have with our friends as well. Very much when we get together, it's not about having deep conversations, it's very about it's banter. You have a bit of banter, you have a laugh, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think still there's probably a lot of men out there who really do struggle to kind of to open up, and especially maybe and we spoke about being lonely or feeling lonely doesn't necessarily mean you haven't got people around you. I'm thinking maybe the kind of fathers, the husbands, if and again just thinking of the time of year, if that pressure to be happy and make sure their kids have a good Christmas, or if the family itself is going through a bit of a difficult time, it kind of that you've got that also of of the man being the strong one who kind of carries everything through and carries everyone else through. So yeah, I think that's definitely still something that we've got to work on, and I think we just need to keep on encouraging men of all ages to speak up and just kind of find someone to talk to, even if it's just one person that you trust, just to kind of, if you are feeling that low, you are feeling like like you don't belong, if you're feeling that kind of, maybe not physical isolation, but that inner kind of sense of of isolation, talk to someone about it. I think it's always the first step is opening up and finding someone that you can talk to.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think for me as well, when I think about vulnerability and talking about difficult emotions and how that relates to loneliness, it strikes me that men are often sort of encouraged to be quite competitive with each other, and to be quite self-sufficient. So, but friendship kind of relies on vulnerability. So if you can't be vulnerable with people, then you're not going to make meaningful connections with others. You're not going to be able to build those friendships. So it seems to me like if vulnerability is like a prerequisite really for friendship. So unless men can find ways to be more comfortable with that, they're putting themselves at risk of loneliness. Dan, does that ring true for you? Have you got any other thoughts on that?
Yeah. Just thinking about it, and I was just trying to formulate a response because I think it's a really interesting time in history to be a man. I think that what being a man is in 2021 is still being redefined from what it was 20 or 30 years ago. And I think that we talked about a bit earlier, the 16, 24-year-olds maybe not knowing who they are, but I think that's a bit of an epidemic among men at the moment. Go back 20, 30 years ago, it was often the man was a single breadwinner in the house. We can't really afford to do that anymore. If you live in somewhere, you often need two incomes just to keep a roof over your head. A lot of the things, I know that kind of Rob was talking about pubs. Historically, a pub was always seen as a very male space, and that's a very much a family space as well, which I don't think is a bad thing. It's just more of an observation. And I think that when we're looking at things like gender equality and this kind of thing at the moment, it's such an emotive subject. I don't think men always know where they fit in the world anymore. I think that we're still we've had this very carved out place in the world, and we've kind of moved away from that, really for the betterment of our society. But I think men are now trying to find where they fit, which makes people feel lonely because you don't feel like you have a space that is yours anymore. And I think that's something which a lot of men are kind of trying to figure out where they fit in the world. Did you see a lot of stuff online about things like the gender pay gap? Well, there's a lot of men on minimum wage who look at that and say, well, no, I'm not paid more because I'm a man, I'm on minimum wage. And I think that even that makes some men feel like, well, no, that's just not true because it isn't, even though there's evidence there to suggest it is. But I kind of think that it's that a lot of people don't really see where they fit in the world. I think it makes things difficult. Like I said on a previous point, if you don't know where you fit in the world, then of course you're going to feel lonely. So you feel it's not built for you. It's not built for you to live and exist and thrive in. I think men are struggling with that.
Yeah, I think like you say, there's it with any kind of change like that. There's positives and negatives, and like you say, I think those traditional ideas about what it means to be a man, they still persist in certain ways, but I think they can be quite restrictive for a lot of people. So it's liberating in some ways that things are changing and that there are increasingly multiple different ways to be a man, I think. But you're absolutely right with that lack of a fixed sort of cookie cutter model to follow. Maybe there's uncertainty that comes with that. There's anxiety. A sense of insecurity.
Exactly. And they're things that men historically have always had. They've always known their place in the world. It's good it's changing. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to sound like I'm complaining about equality. Well, I'm really not. But I kind of think that is there's people that are feeling left behind because of that. They don't know where they fit.
I think that's a very fair point. It does. The world has kind of changed. It is a very interesting time to be a man. And, as you say, kind of traditionally, what was it? That traditional view of you're a man, you go out, you're the breadwinner, you have a family. And I know that's something that, and that is something that I kind of struggled with personally for a number of years when I wasn't working, I was too unwell to work. I didn't have a family. I didn't, I have my own family, I didn't have a partner, I didn't have kids or anything. I've now accepted that actually I'm not so fussed about having kids, and that's fine, But it's a very confusing time, and I think if you don't, if you don't feel like you quite belong, then it's going to have it's going to have that massive negative impact on your mental well-being.
Cool. So this kind of leads quite neatly into the next point, which is, do we think men sometimes struggle more than women to form friendships and meaningful relationships? And if so, why do we think that is? Maybe I'll start with Dan this time.
I'll start with me this time. Thank you.
Put you on the spot there, Dan.
Oh. Yes. Yeah. do men struggle more to make meaningful relationships than women? I think some men do. I think some people do. I think it is hard to make connections. I always go back to when it's not something that we're really taught to do as young boys. I don't think how to make connections. A lot of my mates as a kid were my mum's friends' children, who should take us around there and say, yeah, but this is Bill, he's your friend now, and then you and Bill be mates forever. And as they don't really get taught how to make these connections, I don't know if women do, that might be something someone might be able to enlighten me on. I don't know if they have more natural skills or if they're taught better as kids to build relationships. I don't think men are great at it, to be fair. I think, like you're saying about being competitive, I think work environments are very competitive, where you can make connections with your peers, but there is always that kind of competition at the back of your mind of waiting for the next job to come up, the next big opportunity in an organisation. And I think like men by nature, we can be ultra competitive.
Yeah, and like I say, I think it does feed into what we've talked about, you know, if you can't be vulnerable, and if society in various different ways is telling them they can't be vulnerable, then it's difficult to make those friendships.
I think it is. It's so hard. I mean, I grew up in Portsmouth, and I think that, you know, every school trip I went on as a kid was always to either the historic dockyard, to the D-Day Museum, to the kind of Royal Marines Museum we have in the city as well. Every school trip is based around war. Every statue is this big burly soldier who's kind of very, very bravely given their life to be able to protect what we hold dear in this country. And I think that's something that really does. I think that sticks with you. I mean, I'm sure it happens in other cities as well, but I think especially in Portsmouth, everything you do as a kid is kind of highlights war, it highlights sacrifice, it highlights what being a man is, and that's being able to stand on your own 2 feet and be able to fight. And I think that does get ingrained in young people a bit. That's what men do. It's not about being vulnerable. It's about bravery. It's about sacrifice.
So it does make me think of one thing very quickly before I move on to Rob. And I'm talking a little bit just off the top of my head, so I want to be careful and say that I'm not sure if this particularly affects men more than women. But it strikes me that men often make friendships in the context of institutions. So whether that's a place of work or a football team or something like that, and when that changes, or if it no longer exists, then those friendships quickly dissolve away. And I wonder if women are better at holding on to friendships and making friendships more spontaneously outside of those institutions. I don't know if there's any sense in that, but it's just something that occurs to me now. So Rob, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I guess on that point you made there, I mean, I just, when you said that, I just automatically, in my head, I was like, wow, okay, let's have a think about my closest friendship groups.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I think about that more. Actually, like two of my like, closest friendship groups, so 2 of them I met when I was at college, and still friends. We are still friends to this day, though, thankfully, you know, and then people that they've met through work, etc. But yeah, it is tough. I think I do. I don't want to kind of put a definitive answer on the question, because it is difficult, and it is obviously, it varies. You know, you have some men who will be so outgoing and seem to be able to draw in. You know, they'll go out and they'll be able to draw in all these people and talk to anyone. And you know, and likewise, you know, you'll have, for example, women who really who can't do that, men who can't do that. But going back to what Dan said, I think, and again, you know, also, you know, someone else who's grown up in Portsmouth, you know, that, yeah, there is that kind of atmosphere of like toughness, really, that kind of permeates in Portsmouth, really. And I do think maybe men can be more prone to certain behaviours that can make it more difficult. I think that's definite. Yeah. If, you know, and you can still make friendships without, really opening up to people on a deep level. But, to make those kind of really deep, rewarding friendships, it must be, on some level, I would say it probably is tougher to maintain or make those if you're if you feel you can't open up, if you can't kind of show vulnerability. I know that with my friendships, my friends, I can show vulnerability in front of them. I have friends that I've had when I've needed to have a cry, and I know we're not meant to do that as men, but when I've needed to have a cry in front of some friends, I've had, I've sat there and just let it all out in front of them. And but then I'm aware that a lot of people will find that difficult. So I think maybe we are. I would say maybe, in my opinion, I think men maybe can be more prone to those behaviours that just make it a little bit more difficult to go out and make those friendships, or maintain them. Or again, going back to that earlier point, you could have lots and lots of friends that you talk to on a regular basis, but again, if you can't, if you feel that you can't open up to any of them, and you feel you can't show vulnerability with them, that must feel incredibly hard. And I know there was a long time when I didn't feel I could open up to a lot of my friends, and it did exacerbate those feelings of loneliness. I was going out, I was seeing them every other weekend. I was going to the football with them, I was going out to the pub with them, but for a long time I couldn't talk about, I couldn't talk about when I was struggling. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And I just remember sitting in a pub with friends and feeling incredibly lonely in that moment. When I had them all literally around the table with me.
That rings so true for me as well. Yeah.
I think some good points in there, Rob. So I think as well, I wonder, so we talk about men and maybe struggling to make meaningful relationships and friendships, a bit more of that. I'm not sure how receptive men are to it, to be honest, either. I'm not sure how receptive. I don't know. I can't imagine a situation where I was in a pub with some friends and a random guy walked over and said, "Look, I'm feeling lonely. Can I come and sit with you?" Of course, you'd be welcome to come and sit with us, but I can't imagine that. There's no real social construct to say, well, this is how this should play out. This is how this should. So I don't really know how that would work, even if someone was able to come and walk up to a group of random lads somewhere and say, "Look, I'm feeling lonely. Can I come and hang out with you guys?" I think most people would accept that but it doesn't fit the social construct that we live in, does it? Which is probably wrong thinking about it. But I think you think, well, why is this guy going to sit with us? Who is he? Is he dangerous? Is he a good person? Is he going to try to rob my phone off a table later? I think these are the things that a lot of men would think if that situation was presented to them.
Yeah, it's difficult sometimes. I think if you're sitting there, if you're in that situation and you are the person feeling lonely, it can feel daunting, and it can feel unclear about how to go about changing that, because the chances are you're already doing things with people. You'll be coming across people at some point in your life, whether that's through work or even just going out in the community, getting shopping and things like that. And the fact that you feel lonely might be quite confusing, and it might be quite difficult to identify. It's like, why do I feel like this? Why do I feel disconnected from people? Because I am surrounded by them all the time. And like you say, that there's no obvious script about how to feel better and how to actually work on that feeling of loneliness and make those meaningful connections. And like you say, Dan, I don't think boys are particularly taught, I don't think we're parented in a way generally that encourages us that gives us the skills to make those lasting friendships in a really effective way.
I keep going back in my mind. One of our colleagues, Royson, who's been on the podcast before, he's not with us today, obviously. I keep on remember him saying, he made this point that, in a lot of ways, it does seem that maybe, girls, at a young age, women, and girls are maybe kind of taught more to kind of I don't know if it's that they're taught more, or they just need to develop a better kind of knack of talking and communicating and being open. And whereas with young lads, that doesn't seem to quite come through in the same way. And I think, it's very hard thing to put. It's very hard for me to put my finger on it and define why that happens. But I think there's an argument that there is a case. Again, I don't know if it's getting better with the younger generations coming up now, but I think generally, I think I was told that I saw that you're nodding away that for probably people with of our age, that it was the thing. We just didn't really. I don't know about you, but I just didn't really kind of talk about this stuff when I was young. There was very certain topics that were kind of off the table. I spoke about being able to cry with one of my friends. I can do that now. There's a lot of people though who probably still. But if I said to them, "I need to have a bit of a cry in front of you," they'd probably run a mile. Who wants to see a big 6'4" bearded bloke have a break down and cry in front of them? A lot of blokes.
I don't think many people would. I don't think many people would. I think that's our perception of men.
Yeah.
I think that's our perception of men more than that's how we think people are going to react to having this big 6'4" lovable bear with a big beard crying. I think most people around you would want to support you through that, but you're right. It's not, unless you feel safe to do it, you're going to think, well, they don't want to see that. They don't want to be involved in that. I need to do this on my own, which again is going to make you feel lonely because I don't feel like you belong anywhere. I think we've all done that. That's not a criticism of you, by the way. I think we've all done that. That's the thing, isn't it? Is that, I think most people would. If anyone, I work in mental health, but if anyone in my circle or friends said, look, I just need to come and see you and have a cry for an hour, they'll be welcome to. But it's never happened. But I kind of think that's because there's men, but we don't think, do you know what? I need to go and have a good cry with someone and have someone give me a hug, pat me on the back and say, it'll be all right, mate. Because sometimes that's all you need. You need a good cry. You need someone who you like and respect to say, mate, you got this, and you'll get through it. That's what you need. But you won't go out and seek it because that is really embarrassing and makes you quite vulnerable as a guy.
I think you hit the nail there, actually, on the head. I think it's, I know there are people that I can do that with, and I know there are friends. I know any of my close friends, would, if they would be there in a shot, if they knew I was really struggling, or I know they'd be willing to sit with me, but I think, that's the thing, even though I know that, I've still got that kind of little thing in the back of my head that, no one's going to want to do that, no one's going to want to see that, and I think that's maybe, again, that is what's holding back and keeping, a lot of men maybe in, feeling feeling that crushing loneliness, maybe that, because we're telling ourselves, I'm a big bloke, I'm not meant to cry, no one's going to, we're telling ourselves no one's going to want to see that, or I'm going to get told to man up, or, But
I think that's anxiety for you, isn't it? I mean, for me, that's anxiety in a nutshell. If you're ever feeling low or depressed, even if you don't really have a anxiety diagnosis, I think any low mood or low self-esteem will come with a touch of anxiety anyway, and that touch of anxiety is that bit that's going to tell you that people don't want to see me cry, and people don't want to see that, people don't get involved. It's anxiety. It's because you're worried about what the reaction will be when you make that call to someone, when you call someone up and say, look, I'm in a real bad place, can you come and see me, please? The anxiety is telling you that they don't care, they don't want to hear it, they're going to see you as being a burden, and why should they have to deal with it? But that's anxiety in a nutshell. It keeps you in this perpetual loop, going round and round in a circle, because you need to reach out and speak to someone, but that thing that's making you feel that way is working against you in such a heavy way. It's telling you, no, don't do that. That's the worst thing you can do. And that makes you feel more anxious, and then that stops you sleeping because you're worried about that all night. You're not, and then trying to regulate any emotion when you're anxious and sleepy is really difficult. It's difficult to do when you're feeling well, let alone when you're feeling rough. So
I'm really glad you've mentioned that point there, Dan, about worrying about being a burden, because I think that's that ties into the thing around vulnerability as well. I think because
that's the next big circle on Thomas Joyner's kind of model for suicide is burdenlessness.
Absolutely.
As well, you know? When you put all these things together, and you can really see why we do have a problem in this country with men taking their lives at the moment.
Yeah,
definitely. Brilliant. Well, I think we're coming towards the end of the episode this month. But before we tie things up, a final question for you both. Obviously, this time of year, many men who may be single or not have families might be feeling more lonely than usual. So what would you say to any men watching or listening today who are feeling especially lonely and low due to the time of year?
So I think if I could just like steam in on this one, so I mean this does kind of ring very true to me. So I mentioned, so in the previous episode, or in the live stream episode, you know, I mentioned about, you know, I lost a partner to suicide a number of years ago back, and it was kind of just after Christmas period, you know, maybe like early February, but you know, in all the years following that, again, even though I was spending it with my family, I felt incredibly lonely and isolated at times, you know, because, you know, I'd had before the partner died, we'd had our first kind of proper Christmas together. You know, it's big family Christmas. You know, I cooked dinner for about 9-10 people. It was brilliant. I didn't have to do the washing up. That was what was also brilliant about it. But yeah, and I think, you know, and then I really struggled with Christmas and years following that, because, you know, there is, and we spoke about it earlier, all the advertising you see, it's all kind of focused around kind of families and, you know, and kids, and, you know, and yeah, I found it extremely difficult. I think one of the ways I did cope was, and especially for maybe people for single men who are maybe spending it with, you know, their parents or siblings, whatever, you know, don't feel guilty if you have to take yourself off for a bit and just kind of have some time to yourself. Don't feel guilty about saying to people, and just saying, look, it's Christmas, I struggle with this. You know, there's almost like, and I kind of used to refer to it as an enforced jolliness around this time of year, a pressure that we all feel to be, you know, and it's very easy to feel that pressure, that even if you're not feeling it, to be like, oh, I've got to be.
That's exactly right, isn't it?
I've got to take part. It's like, actually, it's okay to give yourself that time. It's okay to feel miserable. You know, it's understandable. You know, again, talk to people, even if it's just, you know, 1 or 2 people you trust, to, you know, make sure you give yourself the time that you need. Be kind to yourself, put yourself first. I think I know that sounds very kind of generic almost advice, but I think that is, for me, that's the key. It's, you know, don't be afraid to put yourself first, and yeah, try, and please don't feel guilty if you really do struggle this time of year, especially if you are single or if you're on your own. I mean, if you are on your own, I know we've spoken about, you know, the resources that are out there. Maybe, you know, have a quick kind of look, you know, if you've got social media accounts, or, you know, have a quick look to see if what is out there. There's lots of, now I actually I know COVID has had a bit of a hit on things, but, you know, there might well be things open on Christmas Day where you can go if you are feeling lonely, you know, or, you know, or numbers that you can call. But yeah, so, I mean, I guess that's not really kind of advice really, but yeah, just don't be hard on yourself. You know, put yourself first. So I feel like that was a bit of a rambling answer there.
No, it's good. It's good. And I love that. I love that idea about Christmas being almost like the ultimate planned fun event. Yeah. And we all know planned fun is the worst kind of fun.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point there, Rob. My favourite Christmas movie is A Muppet's Christmas Carol. Every Christmas Eve, me and my wife watch that, have a bit of hot chocolate. When you think about the character of Ebenezer Scrooge. Here's another lonely older gentleman who's taught, if you embrace Christmas, everyone will be your mate. That's effectively what happens. He's taught in that film, embrace Christmas, get the Christmas spirit, and then everyone will be mates with you after that. And yeah, life doesn't quite work that way. I still love the movie. I can't have a go at Muppets Christmas Carol. I mean, I've got to leave Kermit out of this, but I think that, yeah, that's a good point that it isn't forced fun. It's, you will have a good time, you will be merry, you will be jolly, and you will have a great time. And it's okay not to. But I think to your question, the best advice I'll give to someone at this time of year who's lonely, as cheesy as it sounds, would be just to reach out. My message to people that are listening to this on their own on Christmas Day or over the holidays is, you're worthwhile, you're valued, you're loved, and there's a place for you in our society and our community. And I'll do anything I can to encourage people to reach out and speak to people about how they're feeling. You are worth it. Believe me, we've all been there. You're worth it and you're valued to us. And if that means reaching out to someone in your social circle, please really, really do. If that's not an option, then reach out to us at Solent Mind. And if you're out of our catchment area, then look at the other local minds in your area. There'll be a local mind, whatever part of the country you're in, there'll be a local mind that works in your neck of the woods. Reach out to them. They'll talk to you. They might be able to signpost or support or do anything. But, just remember that you are really valued and that you're loved, and that we want you as part of our community, no matter who you are.
Yeah, I think that's really it. Yeah, reach out to someone, talk to someone.
Mm-hmm.
There are people there. There are services there. And I think sometimes people will be surprised by just how receptive people will be to kind of listening. So so if someone offers you that hand of support, please take it.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. Wise words from you both there. Great. So I think that's an excellent place for us to leave it for today. So before we leave you, brief reminder of the various support options that are out there this Christmas. We've got the Solent Mind support line, contactable on 02380 179 049. Again, that's 02380 179 049. We've got the Samaritans on 116 123. Again, that's 116 123. And finally, a reminder that your local GP is also a great resource of information and referrals to a variety of services that can help with mental health and well-being. So thank you very much to our sponsor, Novatech, for helping to make this podcast a reality. And thank you very much to today's guests. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you. And happy Christmas, everyone.
And thank you, Dan.
Yeah, thank you for listening, everyone. Have a great Christmas if you can.
And on behalf of Solent Mind, to all of our listeners, I wish you a Merry Christmas and thanks for listening.